So, Shaun, we're going to dive into the final topic of today. And this one actually is going to have, I'll give a little secret. This one will have a Notre Dame flair to it. There will be some Notre Dame conversation today. We are now going to rank the 5 best newcomers at quarterback. Now, what is a newcomer? A newcomer is someone who's going to his first year as a starter at the school he's at, but primarily where he's the full-time starter. There's only one guy on the list that you could debate, doesn't belong on this list. What does not include being a previous starter is if you had some injury start. So like Arch Manning starting 2 games last year doesn't make him a returning starter. He was not their starter. He filled in 2 games for an injury. This is more so guys that are going into their first year where they are the guy. They're also guys that are we could have put new guys at new schools. We could have had transfers, but we didn't. Do you have your 5? Do you need me to send you your 5, Shaun? You have this one written down, right? You didn't change any from this list, so you're good to go. So it could be freshmen. It could be a senior who's never started before. It doesn't have to be a young guy, but in our instance, they are mostly young guys. So, Shaun, without further ado, why don't you kick things off and break down who you have as your 5 best newcomers at quarterback going into the 2025 season. Actually, it looks like Shaun froze up a little bit on there. So I don't know that we'll be able to get Shaun's list unless that's me that froze up. So real quick in the chat, can you guys hear me? Are you guys seeing me, hearing me right now? Because I want to make sure that the issue right now is Shaun and not my computer. Are you guys able to hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up in the chat? Let me know that you're hearing me right now. Okay, so it's an issue with Shaun. So what I'm going to do then is I got to get a new list up here because I had Shaun's list pulled up. So I got to pull up my list here. So just so people ask about certain quarterbacks, the USC quarterback is not on the list because he did step in as a starter last year. He was their starter for a good chunk of the season. Andrew, I don't count him on this list, but I think it was Andrew that asked about that. I'm also not going to push back on you having him on your list, Andrew, because he didn't start the season as a starter. He came off the bench, and as I've said in the past, that's the case. But the other thing that makes me say why he's not on my list also is he did start for a full year at UNLV. So that's another reason he's not on my list for quarterback. So Shaun is back. So I got to go back and bring your list up, Shaun. I had pulled mine up because I wasn't sure how soon you're going to be back, but you came back pretty quick. So let me get Shaun's list up here. And Shaun is going to walk you through his top 5 new starters at quarterback. And then while we're talking, we'd love to hear from you guys who you guys think are your top 5. You can also give your opinion of what you think of our list, but also want to hear what you guys think and what your list is. So Shaun, without further ado, let's get things started with your number 5 quarterback, which is a true freshman.
Yeah, Bryce Underwood at Michigan. How can you not like what you saw from this kid watching this film in high school, being the champion that he is? I think it's a steal the way they got him late in recruiting from LSU.
LSU absolutely fans might say literally.
Yes, absolutely. So I love this young man. And it's funny because we were talking about all of the young guys that can go in this slot. And we had about 3 or 4. I settled on Bryce Underwood, and you settled on another one. But yeah, Bryce Underwood at Michigan, first-time starter, is going to be number 5 for me. Number 4 for me, of course, is whomever wins the Notre Dame quarterback situation. Like, they're definitely going to be one of the top 5 first-time starters in college football. C.J. Carr, Kenny Minchey. I think they're going to win a lot of games. They're going to show and improve and be part of or lead the way in what we talked about, which is the offense in the second year under Mike Denbrock, which is going to be more efficient and more explosive and put up more points. So you have to have C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchey at number 4. At number 3, yes, Archer, you'll be happy. Julian Sand from Ohio State. The things we heard about this
he's still not going to be happy. He's going to be mad he's not number 1, but he's on the list.
He probably is going to be, yeah. But, what we heard about this kid even last year during practices and leading up to the bowl game and how he was running the offense and he's just immensely talented. And then just the track record of quarterbacks, even first-time starters at Ohio State under Ryan Day, extremely successful. So Julian Sand definitely has to be on this list at number 3. Number 2 for me, Notre Dame fans, they are a familiar name, similar story. You hear about what he was doing during practices. Dante Moore at Oregon. Great expectations for this young man. The talent has never been a doubt. Just situations and, UCLA with Chip, was it the right situation? Eventually he lands at Oregon in a spot that he's given a year to learn, 1 year in a system and
You
grow.
want me to make it simple, Shaun?
Go ahead.
He signed out of high school with the school his dad wanted him to go to. He's now going back to the place he wanted to go to, which I think is going to benefit him. I'll say it. You're being nice.
I'll say
it.
Yes. You
don't disagree, though.
Today. No, I don't disagree. Dante Moore is number 2. And number 1, it was pretty easy, right? Look, you could talk about the name. It's not his fault that the last name he was born to, that's not his fault. But what is going to be telling is what he's able to do in an absolute favorable situation when it comes to roster, talent at the skill position, offensive line help, running back, and probably the best play caller and one of the best developers of quarterbacks in all of college football. It is what it is. He's coming into a perfect situation, and he has had multiple years in that same system and has actually been part of or been around big time games to recognize what it is that he's walking into. I don't think he's walking into this situation blindly. I think he's going to be very aware of what it is to be the quarterback at the University of Texas. Arch Manning, without a doubt, is number 1 on my list. So those are my top 5 guys that are first-time starters. And there were some guys that I actually considered.
I know there's at least one on my list that you considered. Let me ask you: Did you think at all about Gunnar Stockton from Georgia? Did you think about him at all?
I did. I'll give you 3 names I thought about. I thought about Gunnar Stockton and CJ Bailey at North Carolina State because he wasn't the starter at the beginning of last year.
He fits in that criteria. Correct.
Fits in that, but I was like, I was impressed with what I saw. And if he takes that next step, he could be a guy that we say, man, we should have put him on that list. And then I think Joey Aguirre.
Let me just say one thing about CJ, because I love that kid. He was in my conversation for breakout. Another name I had as a potential breakout was like Eli Holstein, who, if you look at what Pitt did when he was a starter, and then what Pitt looked like when he left, when he got injured, it was like a completely different team. But the only reason I didn't go with CJ is because you are correct. In the criteria we've talked about, he didn't begin the season as a starter, but he took over in game 3. And passed for 2,400 yards and then, rushed for almost 300 yards. So that's the only reason I didn't have him on this list. If I counted him as eligible for this list, he's on my list. That kid is fun to watch, Shaun. And he's a true like dual threat kid in a modern sense, in that he can sit back in the pocket and hurt you, but he can also take a game over with his legs. He's a lot like what I talked about with John Mateer, in that he can throw for 3 bills on you. But if he's having an off day throwing the ball, he can still hurt you because he can move around. So CJ Bailey was one that I had a tough time even thinking about which list does he belong to, Shaun. That was really my issue with him. And I ended up selling on him being the returners list, which is why he wasn't on my list. But that kid, if you count him as a first-year starter, which is totally fair, it's hard not to put him on the list. That kid is fun to watch. For me, I'm talking about just for me. Really fun to watch. Really fun to watch. And who was the third one you said? What was the third one you said?
The Joey Aguirre kid from UCLA. I think he's going to be fun to watch as well. I think he's going to be really fun to watch.
Did he transfer in from somewhere?
That's a good question. I think he did. I had it right here in my notes.
Because he's basically taken over for the Garber kid that left last year, who's out of eligibility. So yeah, Joey. Let me see, where was he? Yeah, he came from. Looks like he was at App State.
App
See,
State.
here's why he wasn't on my list, because he's a kid that threw for over 3,000 yards the last 2 years at App State. I'm just remember doing that name pop
I said
reminded me.
Aguilar. Aguilar. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
but he's a kid that's a 2-year starter. So to me, he fits in that transfer conversation more so than the first year
Yeah.
conversation. He's another guy that you look at. Any other freshmen, like true freshmen? Like that's the thing there weren't a lot of true freshmen I looked at
Yeah.
and was like, yeah,
I
that guy's
don't.
play a ton. I
I
didn't
don't
see
want
it.
to step. I don't want to step on your
I
list,
don't
but
have
yeah,
any
I
true
looked at some.
freshmen. I don't have any true freshmen on my
I thought
list.
about
I know Keelan
nah.
Russell's one, but
Keelan Russell was
Keelan
one,
Russell's
but
going to
yeah,
be a part of another conversation we're going to have here in the next month or so. We're gonna have a talk about QB battles here in the next couple weeks. And Alabama's in that QB battle where I don't know that we know who the starter is going to be. Is it going to be Ty
no, we
Simpson? Is it going to be
don't.
Austin Mack? Wisconsin's another one. Is it going to be Billy Edwards? Is it going to be Danny O'Neal? Definitely don't have Deuce Knight on my list, Andrew. So yeah, that's an interesting group, Sean. But I was very curious. Like I don't see a lot of freshmen walking into situations where I feel like they're going to thrive and be better than some guys who are. And part of the reason too is I think the most talented quarterback in the country this year is with the younger group. I think that's where the big time like elite quarterback play is going to be this year. Is it's going to be these young kids we're talking about. Like if we're just talking pure talent, that group of 5 you just named and the group of 5 that I'm going to name, I think are more talented top to bottom than any of the other 2 groups that we had where it's more about experience and production and stuff like that. And I think that kind of factors into it. So let me do mine and then we'll kind of wrap up with it, Sean. My list starts with a kid at Ole Miss, and that's Austin Simmons. We saw this young man last year play a little bit. And I remember the first time I saw him play, I was watching the Georgia game. And first drive of the game, Jackson Dart throws a pick. And Georgia gets the field. They get a short field. They start with a short field, and they go down and score a touchdown. Well, Jackson Dart's still out. And this kid comes in and goes 5 of 6, 64 yards, and leads Ole Miss right down the field. And they get a touchdown. And this is a young kid, and I'm like, this kid can spin it. But it's a lot like what we've talked about with some other quarterbacks, Sean, where it's like this kid has no fear at all. This kid just had to step on the field against Georgia as what is he? I think he was a true freshman. I believe he was he was a redshirt freshman. He's part of the 2023 class. I believe he was a reclassified member of 2023. I believe this is that young kid that stepped up a grade. This kid has got a lot of talent. And wow, Lane Kiffin is not a top 10 head coach, Andrew. He's definitely one of the best offensive minds in college football. There's no doubt about that. And being a great offensive mind doesn't make you a great head coach, just like being a great defensive mind doesn't make you a great head coach. But but not being a great head coach doesn't mean you're not a great offensive or defensive mind. And that's where I'm at with when you look at Ole Miss. Now, the only concern I had, Sean, was they did lose a lot of their weapons from last year. So he is going to kind of have a new look receiving core. But the one thing that Ole Miss kind of has done under Lane Kiffin in his few years there is every year they find guys that can catch the football and run really fast. But I'm like, yeah, but they got Trey Wallace. And I'm like, I watched him last year at Penn State. He ain't it. But it's a great system. The kid's got some talent. He showed me some swagger last year in his limited snaps off the bench, and he's going to have talent around him. So I have Austin Simmons, number 5. I would have been okay going with Bryce Underwood, Sean, but 2 things about that. Number 1 is I don't know that he's definitely going to start the season as a starter with Mikey Keene there from Fresno. And number 2, of all the kids that I considered, he by far has the worst supporting cast. That's the reality of it. Number 4 for me is Julian Sand. I agree with everything you said about Julian Sand. I think he's a talented kid. I think he's a guy that's going to have talent around him. They're going to have a good run. They're not going to have the same running back room they had last year. But with James Peoples and the Donaldson kid from West Virginia, they're still going to have good running backs. It's not like they're going to have some bums. They're going to have the best receiving core in college football next year. And I don't think it's even debatable. They've got young talent at tight end that I like. Their offensive line is not great, but I don't think it's going to be terrible. But the other thing too is Julian's athletic. This is like, he is a passing quarterback, but he is an athletic kid that can run. And I put him and Kenny Minchie in a very similar category, but I'd even say Julian, you might actually do a little bit more designed runs with than you had before. This is a kid, this is a good quarterback, Shaun. This is a kid that's got a lot of ability. And he's number 4 on my list also because it's a lot like Austin Simmons. He's playing in a system where quarterbacks are going to put up numbers. Now, he's got to win the starting quarterback job. I completely expect him to. I think he'll beat out Taven St. Clair and then obviously Devin Brown's at Cal. But I like Julian Sain a lot. He's definitely on my list. I think he's going to be a really good player this year. Number 3 on my list, Shaun, is whoever wins the quarterback job between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie. If neither one of those guys wins the job, the Notre Dame quarterback will go down on my list. May still be in the top 5, but it definitely goes down on my list. I'm projecting one of those 2 kids to win a starting quarterback job. And whoever it is, I have them comfortably in that number 3 spot. A lot of reasons why. And the reasons I have both of them ahead of Julian Sain is I just think they're both better than he is. I think they're both more talented than he is. It's not by a ton. I think Julian Sain, I graded out as a top 50 caliber quarterback coming out of high school, but I had CJ as a 5-star. And I had Julian ranked slightly higher of Kenny coming out of high school, but it was in a year after Kenny. So Kenny has an extra year of experience, an extra year in the weight room. And I think Kenny has shown me some things in college that I didn't know he had. Kenny's mobility in high school was always geared towards extending and throwing. What he showed us at Notre Dame is that he can run and be a runner as well. And you add that to the element as well. So whoever wins the starting quarterback job at Notre Dame also is going to have arguably the best offensive line of all the quarterbacks in this conversation, is going to have the best running back room of all the kids in this conversation, and is going to have a much improved receiving core. It's not Ohio State's, but it's going to be a very good receiving core. You got Greathouse coming back. You got Jordan Faison coming back. You've got Eli Raridan coming back. You've got some talented young players like KK Smith and Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert might be the most ready to play of the young guys all around. You've got talent at tight end, and we haven't even got into the transfers yet, Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. So I think whoever's at quarterback for Notre Dame is going to be surrounded by a very good team, and I think they're going to put up numbers. And we just did a whole show on what Mike Denbrock's offense looks like in year 2. And so I think we're going to see these young men be able to take advantage of that. And then also the October-November schedule is not nearly as hard as and if people keep asking where's Steve, he's backing up whoever wins this job. That's where Steve is. Number 2 on my list is Dante Moore. Dante has a year on those other 2 guys, and Dante's a very talented kid. There's never been a debate about whether or not Dante Moore is talented or not. He is. I've seen him throw live. I've seen him on film. Dante Moore throws a ball as pretty as any quarterback you're going to find in college football. The questions about Dante are, is he big enough to hold up over the course of a season? Where's he at from a maturity standpoint? Is he growing up a little bit? Those are all things you can ask about, but this young man can spin it. I think his decision to go to Oregon, knowing he was going to be a backup, showed me that Dante is starting to take steps towards taking over his life and saying, I got to do what's best for me. And I think that year sitting at Oregon is going to be huge for Dante. Huge for Dante. Now, you look at what he's going to have around him, Shaun. I've talked a little bit about Oregon. Some of my concerns about Oregon is they're not going to be as talented as they were last year. The offensive line is a question mark for me, but they still have talent. They have Evan Stewart coming back. They have Kenyon Sadiq at tight end coming back. They got Jamari Johnson to transfer in. They still have Justice Lowe. They have Gary Bryant. They got the true freshman, the Corian Moore, who's a stud at wide receiver. And they got Jeremiah McClellan, who was a high school teammate of Jeremiah Love. They're not going to have quite the talent they had last year, but they are still going to have talent. The offensive line is the only question mark for me because Dante is a pocket passer. Yes, he is a pocket passer. There's no doubt about that. If that offensive line takes some time to kind of gel, he will suffer from that. But by the time you get to October, November, that line will be in good shape, and Dante's going to put some numbers. And then the final piece, Shaun, is he's playing in an elite offensive system. Will Stein's a brilliant offensive mind. He did it. He did it at where was he? He was at UTSA, and then he's done it at Oregon. He's an excellent offensive mind, and Dante is going to benefit from that as well. And then number one on my list is Arch Manning. We've talked about this before, Sean. We need to rehash overrated, underrated. At the end of the day, forget all whether he should have been the number one quarterback coming out or not. There's no doubt that Arch is talented. He's going into his junior season, which means he's now been in Sark's system for 2 full years. He's got some cleaning up of his throwing game he needs to do, but he's also a kid that brings a lot of dual threat ability to the table. He's going to have talent around him. His defense is going to be good. He's more mature. He's more physically more mature is what I'm referring to. The experience he got last year starting those 2 games will help him coming into this season. And the only thing that you have to ask yourself is, can he handle the immense pressure that's being thrust upon him because his name is Manning? That's an unfortunate situation in some regards, but in other regards might be good for him because he also grew up in the Manning family and he has plenty of mentors to help him through that. But Arch Manning at the top of my list is a no-brainer, Sean. I think he's going to have a big year. He's playing for a great play caller. He's going to have talent around him. They're going to, yes, they went to the portal for some receivers, but there's also some talented young receivers. They're going to be very important parts of what they're trying to do that are returners. So it's not like he's got to work with like a brand new receiving core. He does have Ryan Wingo played a lot last year. DeAndre Moore played a lot last year. Ryan Niblett's a returner from last year. Spencer Shannon at tight end was a kid that played for them last year. So, yeah, they lost a lot, and they have some newcomers, but they didn't go to the portal again to rebuild their receiving core like they did last year. It's all returners and freshmen. And so I think he's in a great situation, and I really like where he's at. So that's my 5, Sean. You had mentioned some of the newcomers that I thought about. There's also some transfer newcomers that I thought about. I said Ricky Collins at Syracuse is a guy that I looked at. We talked about, let me pull up my list. Devin Brown at Cal, Justin Martin at Maryland. Those are all guys that were kind of on my list. Gunnar Stockton is probably number 6 on my list. And I think Gunnar Stockton is the guy that has the best chance of making me say, what was I thinking not putting him on my list? And a big reason why I don't have Gunnar on my list is honestly is of all the guys that I just put right there, there's a big gap between the pass catching options for these 5 and the pass catching options for Gunnar Stockton. The other thing too is I look at the play callers. You're talking about Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. You're talking about Ryan Day and Brian Hartline. You're talking about Mike Denbrock. You're talking about Will Stein, and you're talking about C. Sarkisian. And then who's Gunnar Stockton got? Mike Bobo. Those are the reasons that I don't have Gunnar on the list. If Gunnar Stockton was still playing for Todd Monken, he'd be on my list. He might be number 3 on my list because he's older and the experience he got last year. But it's Mike Bobo and then just major questions about the players around him at Georgia and in the pass game that are why I don't have him on my list. But Gunnar's the one that I think has the best chance to make me look back and say, man, I should have had him on my list. Anybody thoughts on my list, Sean? Questions, comments, anything? No. I mean, our top 4 we have the same. We just flipped 3 and 4.
Yeah, I love your list. I forgot about that moment, that drive that Austin Simmons came in against the Georgia game. That was
impressive.
I'm glad you brought that up. I had totally forgotten about that moment. But yeah, spot on. I think we're thinking along the same lines as you were talking about breakouts in this group. I think I go back to the first group and I'm like, yo, I can't believe that I left or didn't even consider Avery Johnson a little bit more for returning quarterbacks.
K-State, yeah.
Yeah, I think that young kid really has a shot.
Consistency. It's the same thing with like Lenore Sellers. It's the consistency, Sean. Like that's where Avery's got to take his game.
Yeah.
It's now he was, I believe, a lot more productive than Lenore Sellers was last year. I believe I'm pulling up his numbers. Yeah, he passed for 2,700 yards, rushed for 6, had 32 touchdowns. So definitely more productive. But the thing for me with Avery is he had some moments where he looked very average, and he wasn't good in the second half of the year.
Pedestrian.
He only had 2 games. Yeah, he had 7.4 per attempt against Kansas on October 26th, and then 7.9 against Iowa State because he had a couple big throws. He had his last 3 games, he was sub 60% throwing. Now, again, I don't evaluate him the same way as our passers, other guys, because he's so dynamic as a runner, and he did run very well down the stretch. But there
Yeah.
was a lot of inconsistency from Avery, a lot like Lenore Sellers. That is why I didn't have him on my list. But he's a guy that you could also look back on, Shaun, and say, boy, that kid's got a chance to be why did I not have him on my list? But it's honestly what you said about Lenore Sellers. A lot of that is true for Avery Johnson as well. That just consistency and being better in the big moments. That's what I want to see more of from Avery.
And then you can go stay in the same state right down the road to Lawrence, and a reemergence story could be happening with a kid like Jalen Daniels, who's extremely talented kid, right? And that Kansas team came on down the stretch in the Big 12 after a very disappointing start to the season. A kid like that could be a breakout, even though he kind of broke out, and then kind of underwhelmed last year. So we'll see if he can
Can't stay
return.
healthy.
Yeah,
that's the thing with Jalen Daniels, Shaun, is like the guy's just got to stay healthy. Last year was the first healthy year he had, and he had some brilliant moments. I mean, but then he also had some games you're like, dude, you threw almost as many picks as you did touchdowns.
Yeah,
and he didn't run like he has in the past either. Like we didn't see it because of the injuries. But would it shock you if Jalen Daniels put it all together this year, playing for Lance Leopold in year 2 of the offense? No, wouldn't.
Not at all.
It wouldn't.
Not at all.
It wouldn't. There's a lot of quarterbacks like that, Shaun, where you're like, man, there's some kids out there that have some ability, but man, they got to do this, they got to do that.
Yeah.
And this guy's got this injury question, this guy's got that injury question, and there's a lot of that too.
Somebody else that fits that, where he had McMillan his first 2 years, but he didn't have as great of a year as the Fafita kid at Arizona, who now will be in that system with his new coach for a second year.
Right.
So we'll watch to see if Fafita can return back to what he was able to do as a freshman. It's a lot of talented kids out there and a lot of great stories. Like you said, it's not as good of a class, but you might have some of the best quarterback stories in college football this year.
Yeah, and you speaking of stories, I think the Big 12 is going to be a lot of fun at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
There's another guy that's a transfer guy who could also be a first-year starter that people keep mentioning in the chat, like Dylan Lonergan. But why didn't I put him in there? Because I don't know if he's going to start at BC. But he's another talented quarterback that could be like an Eli Holstein, who I didn't love Eli Holstein coming out of the port. Didn't do anything at Alabama in his first year. Goes to Pitt, and he was Pitt's offense last year. He's another guy that, could he have a breakout this year? Desmond Reed's coming back. Could he have a step up this year and break out as one of those top returning quarterbacks?
Yeah.
We'll see. A lot of intriguing. You're right, Shaun. There's a lot of intriguing storylines at quarterback, but I just don't see a lot of elite quarterbacks outside of the younger players. Some of them, the most talented quarterbacks. Like if I'd say, okay, which group would you rather have? Would you rather take the top 5 returners or the top 5 newcomers? And you got to bet the mortgage on one of those two shining. I'm putting my money on the newcomers. Why? Because the talent is significantly better. And that's what makes, I think, this a really fun year. Really fun year.
I see literally there could be 5 first-round NFL picks out of the newcomer list that I had.
Yeah.
Literally. There could be 5 first-round NFL picks at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Out of that list.
I mean, I'll go even further. Maybe even potentially 6, because what if one of those 2 at Notre Dame doesn't win the starting job and then goes somewhere else and plays for a guy that's, you know what I mean? Like, and there you go. There you go. So it is going to be a very fun year. Jalen Daniels is still at Kansas, by the way. Just want to answer Andrew's question. He is still at Kansas. But yeah, it's going to be fun to look at this list before the season, Shaun, after spring battles kind of go through and we see spring games. But it's going to even be more fun to look at this list at the end of the year. Like looking back and what's our top 5 after the season is going to be a whole lot of fun. I can't wait for it. So great show today, Shaun. A lot of fun topics. I hope you all in the chat enjoyed the show today. That's going to be it for today's show, folks. Do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate that. And as always, make sure you have signed up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. For Shaun Davis, I'm Brian Driscoll. We'll talk to you all again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.